Hello, my name is Michael Wiley and I am the Employee Relations Officer for the Northeast Independent School District. The information in this presentation is designed to assist supervisors in documenting personnel issues. The information in this presentation is applicable to anyone who has supervision over other staff. Normally when a supervisor wants to document something, it is a negative incident. In that regard, documentation for minor incidents should start with verbal counseling when verbal counseling has failed. Although there is no magic number, if a supervisor has issued 2 verbal counselings on the same minor issue, it may be time to move to a written documentation. Also, it is recommended that the supervisor make note of the date, time, and subject of the previous verbal counselings so that, if necessary, it can be noted if the written documentation is later required. In the case of serious offenses, the documentation should begin with the first incident. To be effective, any documentation must contain several elements. First, the document must state what the employee did wrong. Go straight to the point and be specific. This information should not contain the supervisor's personal opinions, just the facts. What happened, when it happened, and who witnessed the incident. If the employee has given a reason for the behavior, restate the reason given by the employee and explain why that reason does not mitigate the behavior. Next, state the specific policy, rule, law, or established practice that the employee's behavior violated. If you are unable to state a specific policy, rule, law, or established practice, you may have an issue worthy of documentation. Next, the supervisor should give expectations. As with the violations, the expectations should be clear and concise. State what you want the employee to do and when you want it to be done. Then list the consequences for failing to meet the expectations. Be careful not to give consequences that you may not be able to enforce. For example, instead of saying, failure to meet these expectations will result in termination of your employment, you might say something like, failure to meet these expectations may result in additional adverse action up to and including the recommendation for termination of your employment. This will allow the supervisor flexibility to adjust to any unusual circumstances if the situation arises again. The document should also contain a statement that tells the employee they have the right to provide a written rebuttal within 10 business days and that the employee's signature does not mean the employee agrees with the statement, only that they have received a copy. The supervisor then signs and dates the document and asks the employee to sign and date the document. The employee is entitled to a copy of the document. In some cases, the employee may refuse to sign the document because they do not agree it is factual or because they feel it is inaccurate for some other reason. In this case, the supervisor reaffirms the purpose of the signature and reaffirms the employee's right to provide a written rebuttal. If the employee still refuses to sign, the supervisor should note on the document, quote, employee refuses to sign, close quote, and ask the employee to initial the notation. If the employee refuses to provide their initials, the supervisor should get a witness that the document was presented to the employee. The witness should be someone of higher grade than the employee. The witness signs that the employer refused to sign the document. The employee is still entitled to receive a copy of the document even though they refuse to sign it. Once the document is complete, the supervisor has to decide where the document will be maintained. The supervisor has 2 choices. The supervisor may keep the document at the local level, campus, office, or shop, or the supervisor can send the document to Human Resources. If the document is maintained at the local level, it is normally disposed of when either the supervisor or the employee moves on, unless it was used to reinforce additional documentation. If the supervisor sends the document to Human Resource, the document will be placed in the employee's master personnel file where it will remain permanently. It is important to remember that there are only 2 choices. HR does not maintain hard copies of these documents. The next 2 slides provide tips for good documentation. Information in these tips comes from a presentation provided by Mr. Dennis Eckelbaum of the law firm Eckelbaum, Waddell, Mell, and Hansen. Tip 1, use simple words. Remember, there may be a number of people reading the document at a time and place where you are not there to interpret. The simpler the words, the easier the document is to understand. Tip number 2, when possible, limit the document to a single page. If you have more than 1 page, it may mean you are restating a lot of the information. Tip number 3, be consistent. Document good behavior as well as bad. This will let the reader know that the supervisor is not out to get the employee. Tip number 4, use the actual words used by the employee. While the language may sometimes be offensive to some people, it is important that the reader has a full understanding of what actually occurred. Tip number 5, if possible, Avoid email as a prevalent form of documentation. Emails tend to look busy and casual. Remember, this document may end up before the board of directors or maybe even as evidence in court. Tip number 6, don't rely on spell check. Get someone else to read your document, or if time is of the essence and the document is short, reading it backwards will highlight errors. This has been just basic information on the documentation process. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at the phone number or email address listed below. Thank you.